This movie that is very, very disturbing and is actually banned in 40 different countries. What the cannibal holocaust. The director and producers of the movie ended up getting arrested for obscenity and charged for murder.
Because of how real the scenes looked, right? I
Yes,
heard about this shit before.
Yes. Not only that, because it showed real life animals dying. It shows one scene that caused question was there was a scene where a woman was being impaled and the court didn't know if it was real or not. The director ended up telling the actress to go to court so she could confirm that they were all alive and well. And now this is where it gets controversial because of the animals that died in the film. And again, the fucking overall plot of the movie is a good plot, but the way the director went about everything was like so fucked up and inhumane, and it does not justify whatever he decided to do. Same thing with the actors that played a part in it. So again, trigger warning, bro, because these are actual shit that happened in the movie. There's a muskrat that gets gutted and its insides are fed to one of the tribe members. There's a monkey that gets its skull spliced before his insides are drank.
Oh my gosh, bro.
The most fucked up one is about a turtle. They end up bending it.
She escapes with a second to spare.
Hey, yo, man.
The drama unfolded at 2 in the morning when the woman arrived home from a long day at work. She says she noticed the stranger lurking outside her building.
So the 50-year-old woman who was seen in that video has to this day still remained unidentified. And on September 23rd, 2021, she was returning home when this man suddenly decided to charge at her. The woman later claimed that she had seen the man and a friend hanging out acting sketchy at the base of her apartments, and that if she hadn't have locked her door the same way that she did and gotten in the nick of time, she still doesn't know what could have happened. I mean, this video is honestly horrifying. I can't imagine someone chasing me to my apartment door and barely being able to lock the door in time to keep them outside. Who knows what this person would have done if they had gotten into the apartment with this woman? It's really frightening. So police at first had no idea who this guy was, but they eventually identified him as 42-year-old Orisha Lucky. And he had 37 prior arrests on his record before that night. 37 different arrests. So after Orisha was arrested, he was charged with attempted burglary, harassment, and criminal trespassing. But it's still, that video is just so frightening, and it really is scary to think of what could have happened if she didn't get the door closed and locked just in time.
This is the elevator game. This game is a ritual of Korean origin and apparently allows you to go to other dimensions and contact spirits. I don't recommend trying it. The requirements to play the game are a building with an elevator and at least 10 floors. Also, you have to be alone in the elevator. To start the game, you have to be in the elevator on the first floor. Then, press the button for the 4th floor. Then, once you reach the 4th floor, press the button for the 2nd floor. Then, when you reach the 2nd floor, press the button for the 6th floor. After this, press the button for the 2nd floor, and after that, the 10th floor. Finally, hit the button for the 5th floor. When you reach the 5th floor, a mysterious woman is supposed to appear. She will try and get your attention, but the rules of the game say you have to ignore her. After, press the button for the 1st floor, and if the elevator takes you to the 10th floor, this means you've done it correctly, and when the doors open, you will be in another dimension, and it could be a very peaceful one or a very, very dangerous one.
The house in this murder case was known as the most notorious crime scene in history. This is the disturbing case of Lizzie Borden. It was the 4th of August in 1892 in Fall River, Massachusetts. Inside his family home lay Andrew Borden, who was lying on his back on the sofa deceased. When investigators got to the scene, they found his daughter, Lizzie, was outside. She said she had been there at the time of the murder, but she was outdoors in the barn. But Andrew was not the only casualty that day. Inside the home, upstairs in the bedroom, lay another victim. This time it was Lizzie's stepmom, Abby. She was lay face down and rigid, having been struck and killed with a hatchet. Now, Lizzie's dad was a wealthy man, and the family lived in a very well-off area where crimes rarely took place. This made the news of the murders even more shocking to the local community. Suspicions soon fell on Lizzie, having been there, obviously, at the house at the time of the murders. Interestingly, she'd also never got on with her stepmom. Her dad had remarried after Lizzie's mum had passed away, and she made it obvious to her new stepmom that she didn't like her and felt like she was a gold digger. Tensions were reportedly growing, and Lizzie was also unhappy with her dad for his actions around money. He'd apparently started gifting Abby's family properties. Both Lizzie and her sister Emma had reportedly grown distant from her dad and stepmom. Now, when police spoke with her, Lizzie was reportedly quite rude and had an attitude. They also said that her story was really contradictory and she couldn't keep her story straight. She first said that she'd heard moans and groans from the house during the murders, and then she changed her story and said she'd heard nothing. Frustratingly, at the time of her questioning, she wasn't checked for any blood on her. Investigators also didn't thoroughly search her. They did find the murder weapon later on in the basement of the house. Interestingly, Lizzie was spotted burning a dress in the days after the murders. When she was questioned about this, she just said that she'd got some paint on one of her dresses and that's why she burnt it. Other people wondered whether there was a more sinister reason. Lizzie was arrested and put on trial for the double murder. Just 5 days prior to the trial, another brutal murder took place in the local area. A woman was hacked to death in her kitchen, and some were wondering whether a serial killer was on the loose and to blame for both murders. Now, interestingly, later on, a man called Jose was convicted of that murder, and it was determined not to be in connection with the Borden family murders. Lizzie claimed that she was not inside the house at the time of the murders for about half an hour while they took place, and one witness did reportedly see her outside of the house that day. The jury acquitted Lizzie, but many believe she got away with murder. Others believe that Lizzie's uncle John could have been responsible. He didn't see the family a lot and strangely stayed the night before the murders. He also had a suspiciously strong and well thought out alibi.
You guys obviously know the movie The Exorcist.
Of course,
one of the
yeah.
most famous horror movies of all time.
Of course, yeah.
Still to this day, people say that that movie is cursed. A lot of things happened on set. A lot of family members ended up passing away during the same time that the movie was being filmed. And then also some of the cast passed away
During the filming.
after the filming, but it's crazy how close it was to the movie. Also, one of the actresses, Ellen Burstyn, which was the mother, she got injured and basically permanently messed up her back. She also had told the people on set that she could get injured doing this, but because of how practical all the stunts were supposed to be, they wanted this shit to be as realistic as possible. And then also the reverend who was on set, and he was actually playing the priest,
Okay.
Reverend Birmingham, they had asked him, yo, so much shit is happening, there's a lot of weird energy, you think you could do some sort of exorcism
Real life exorcism.
on the set? Yeah. And he was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. But he ended up blessing the set because he did feel
The weird energy.
the weird negative energy. But the weirdest thing of them all, the house that they were filming The Exorcist in burned down, but it was some sort of freak accident. They just say that what possibly could have happened is that a bird flew directly into the power line and that caused some sort of electrical fire type thing.
Yeah.
I understand the fire, right? But why the was the only room that stayed intact?
Was the room that they performed the exorcism in?
Yes, where she was tied on the bed. That whole set was completely fine. Everything else burned down.
What the?
Abby and Zoe were best friends enjoying a quiet evening together. Abby's laughter echoed through the room as she sipped her wine. Zoe's 2-year-old son played on the floor, his tiny hands rummaging through his mother's purse. As Zoe stepped away to use the bathroom, Abby turned her attention to the boy. "What are you playing with, little man?" she asked, smiling. The toddler giggled innocently, his hands fumbling through lipstick and keys until they landed on something cold and metallic. It was a gun. The tiny boy, oblivious to the danger, began waving the handgun around, pointing it at Abby. Her heart sank and panic filled her voice. "Put that down, sweetie. That's not a toy," she pleaded, her voice trembling, but he didn't understand. And then the single shot echoed through the house. Abby's lifeless body slumped to the floor, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. Blood covered the entire floor. Hearing the shot, Zoe sprinted back into the room. The sight before her was a nightmare, her best friend motionless in a growing pool of blood. Her son still playing with the gun as though nothing had happened. With shaking hands, Zoe snatched the gun from her son, tears streaming down her face. She called 911, choking on her words as she explained the unthinkable tragedy. The authorities arrived, but nothing could undo what had just been done. One innocent moment of a child's curiosity had turned into an unimaginable tragedy.
He burned his girlfriend alive. If any case is going to make you want to stay single, it's this one. It was the 25th of April 2009 in Arbroath in Angus in Scotland. Jessica McCarr was 17 years old and she'd been dating 18-year-old Stuart Blackburn for around 2 years. Jessica was a lovely girl by all accounts. Her loved ones described her as a ray of sunshine. She was super friendly and had no problems with getting on with everybody that she met. She could not be more polar opposite to Stuart. Stuart had been in the foster care system since he was 11 years old. Even early on, there were signs that he was a violent person. In one placement, he set fire to his bedroom because he felt angry. And then when he was 13, he threw a petrol bomb at a house of somebody who he just had a disagreement with. He was described as destructive and disturbed. Now, Jessica's family really didn't like Stuart, but it was kind of one of those situations that I feel like we've all been in when either your friend or your family member goes out with somebody who you really don't like, but you can't really force them to break up with them. Behind the scenes, Stuart was extremely violent towards his girlfriend, but he didn't stop there. He also threatened Jessica's dad and said that he was going to burn his house down. On the day in question, the couple had been at a friend's party when they got into an argument and decided to leave. However, not before Jessica told one of her friends that she was planning on ending the relationship. And what do we know about DV relationships? Well, you're most in danger when you try and leave. They went back to their flat where things only escalated further. Now, presumably Jessica tried to break up with Stuart, but we don't know that for a fact. Horrifically, Stuart ended up punching Jessica in the head and she fell to the floor. Stuart then got a can of petrol and poured it over his girlfriend. The terrified teenager was doused in fuel before being set alight. The whole room was ablaze and she obviously desperately tried to get out of the burning bedroom. However, callously, Stuart ran out of the room, grabbed hold of the door and forced it shut. After ensuring that the terrified teenager was kept in that burning room, Stuart ran out of the house and went to Jessica's parents' house. Meanwhile, the neighbour, Ricky Foreman, heard the commotion and knew something was amiss, and he did something incredible. He actually ran towards the danger after hearing the explosion from the flat. He made his way in and kicked the door down to try and save her. He repeatedly filled a fish tank full of water and threw it over her to try and desperately put the fire out. Now, after Stuart had banged on the door of Jessica's parents' house, her dad sprinted round to the flat and obviously found his daughter eventually in a horrific state. She was raced to hospital but had suffered burns to 80 to 85% of her body and passed away in hospital. Now, Stuart tried to claim that a cigarette had accidentally sort of set fire to a petrol can in the room and then he'd cried as his girlfriend was on fire. However, everybody saw through this blatant lie and he was found guilty of the barbaric murder and given at least 21 years. The neighbour Ricky, who tried to save her, was given a Braveheart Award for his courage.
This pedophile senator from North Dakota is one of the most disturbed people I've ever researched. This is all coming out right now in the news, so let's talk about it. Ray Holmberg was born in 1944, and he was first elected to the North Dakota Senate as a Republican in 1976. He ended up serving as a senator for decades, and he became one of the longest serving senators in United States history. But behind the scenes, Ray was carrying out the most demonic activities you can imagine. The first allegations against him came out in 2020, when a man named Canton Todd came out and said that Ray had sexually assaulted him in 2010. You can read some of his tweet there. Canton provided evidence of where he was assaulted, and investigators were actually able to show that that apartment was indeed owned by the senator. And they were also able to confirm that the senator was seen with that guy around the same time. But nothing ever came out of this. Then in 2022, a huge scandal erupted. It turns out Ray Holmberg had shared 72 text messages with a child predator inside of prison. So this guy was sentenced for CP production and distribution. And while he was in prison, Ray Holmberg texted him 72 times. Now, obviously, people were asking, what were these texts about? Well, some of the texts that were eventually recovered showed Holmberg asking this convicted predator if he could meet up with his 19 to 20-year-old boyfriend to give him a massage. Holmberg has claimed in the news that these text messages were just about some lawn care. that this pedophile just happened to be redoing his lawn and that's what he was texting him about. And when he was pressed by members of the press, he stated the messages were just simply gone. I don't understand this. In most cases, the police can immediately go back and retrieve any text messages from criminals. So why haven't they done this yet with this guy? But this only gets significantly worse. Just 2 days ago, Ray Holmberg pled guilty to child sex tourism. If you're confused on what that means, this means that Ray, while he was a United States Senator, was traveling overseas to engage in acts with minors. Prosecutors in the case alleged that he traveled 14 times to Prague in the Czech Republic between the years 2011 and 2021 to pay to engage in acts with minors. And even more disturbingly, a number of these trips were state trips. So that means that the United States government was paying for him to go over to the Czech Republic. And he was there on an official capacity. So he definitely did this, and when this all came out, it brought up the history of CP charges that were also leveled at him in the past. That's right, they also discovered that between 2012 and 2013, Ray, who was a United States Senator at the time, was using the alias Sean Evans online to, quote, convince a child to send him schmexually explicit images. AKA, this freak was pretending to be a child online to receive CP from a child. So with all of this, the sexual assault, the traveling to a country to engage in acts with minors, the CP, all of that, you would imagine this guy would go away for a long time, right? These are serious, terrible charges. Well, no, because he pled guilty, he's going to get a sweetheart deal. That means that the Department of Justice dropped the CP charges against him, and the judge is believed to, quote, recommend the low end of the sentencing guideline range. His lawyers have said they expect him to get 3 to 4 years in prison. So for molesting multiple young boys, for convincing a child to send him graphic material, for sexually assaulting a man, for being in contact with a child predator who probably sent him other stuff that got deleted, this guy is going to get 3 to 4 years in prison. Gotta love American justice, right? If you want to join me on my journey to expose pedophiles and creeps like this, listen to my new podcast, The Conspiracy Files. You can either watch it on YouTube or you can listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And in a few weeks, we're going to be doing an episode about pedophile members of Congress and the Senate, and it's really, really disturbing stuff. This guy's definitely going in there.
However, coined the phrase, you can't make this stuff up, might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
A poison expert has been accused of killing his wife by poisoning. 30-year-old Connor Bowman from Minnesota was married to his 32-year-old wife Betty. Betty was a pharmacist described by her loved ones as vibrant and outgoing. She loved traveling and lived life to the full. Now, Connor specialized in poison science, and in August, his wife was hospitalized. She was showing symptoms resembling that of food poisoning. On the 20th of August, just 4 days after her hospital admission, she suddenly passed away. It would be 2 months after her death that Connor was arrested, accused of administering a substance that is fatal in high doses. Shockingly, there is evidence that he Google searched Betty's weight and determined what dose would be fatal. It's alleged that his online searches also included queries about whether internet searches can be used in court. Connor has been charged with second-degree murder.
This disgusting pedophile was captured after using PayPal to purchase CP and CSAM. This is 24-year-old Nicholas Brenshaw from Utah. So investigators started looking into Nicholas in the year 2013. And from December of 2013 to July of 2016, authorities found that Nicholas paid over $2,700 to illegal websites to purchase CP. And while authorities were investigating Nicholas and discovering his disturbing secrets, they found that he was chatting with 19-year-old Elijah Roberts, also from Utah. So Elijah and Nicholas would use apps like Kik and Wicker, I've never heard of Wicker, to exchange CP materials. They would also chat about their deep, disturbing desires to be alone with children. These chats were allegedly extremely graphic and extremely disturbing. So when pedophile Elijah Roberts was arrested in 2016, the authorities found out that he had also allegedly assaulted a 14-year-old boy. He was also found to have been offering this young boy to other men online, meaning he wanted people to come over and assault this boy too. Thankfully though, both of these freaks were sent to prison, but sadly Elijah was sentenced to only 60 months in prison. This is only 5 years. I think both of them deserve longer sentences, but what can I say? This is America. We prefer to punish drug users as opposed to pedophiles.
This teenager was killed by her ex just weeks after getting a no-contact order. Serenity Hawley from Blacksburg, Virginia was just about to turn 18. She was a senior in high school and had just been accepted into Virginia Tech, which she was super excited about. Now the future was looking bright for her, but she had been having issues with an ex-boyfriend. Crony Monk was allegedly harassing her and blackmailing her. Her mum reports that Serenity's school had issued a no-contact order between the two and that there had been an incident between them just a month prior. It was just 2 days before her 18th birthday. The two students were found deceased in a parking garage last week. It's reported that Serenity had been shot in the chest by her ex, who then turned the weapon on himself. Serenity's family are understandably heartbroken and they set up a GoFundMe. This was in order to raise some funds to pay for Serenity's funeral arrangements, and also her family plan on setting up a scholarship in the teenager's memory.
This man was caught on camera murdering his wife and he only got 10 years in prison. Carrie Birmingham, who was 60 years old, shot his wife Patricia Birmingham, who was 48 years old. He shot her 3 times outside their home in Spring, Texas, and the couple had been arguing for about 30 minutes after Carrie allegedly discovered the affair his wife was having. This incident was captured on video by his wife Patricia, and in the disturbing video, Carrie can be seen walking in the driveway with a bathrobe on and a shotgun in his hand. Carrie can also be heard telling his wife, quote, "Okay, bye. You're going to meet Jesus. I hope it was worth it," end quote, before shooting her 3 times and killing her. Whatever you do, don't look up the video. It honestly is pretty disturbing, and I wouldn't recommend watching it. After doing this, Carrie was arrested and charged with murder, being held on a $200,000 bond, and recently in 2024, Carrie Birmingham pleaded guilty to the murder, but claimed he shot his wife in the heat of the moment. And despite the jury being all females, the woman sentenced Carrie to 10 years in prison, with parole eligibility in 5 years. Now I'm going to play a short clip from the video showing Carrie talking to Patricia before he shot her dead.
Video? I'll pull it. I'm mad enough to pull it. Okay. All right, goodbye, Reese. Nice to know you. You go meet Jesus.
Do you remember the time when rapper T.I. stated to the news that he has his daughter's hymen checked yearly? This is one of the most disturbing and just flat out creepy things that I think a celebrity has ever openly talked about, so let's kind of take a look at what he said. So this all came out back in 2019 when T.I. was on a podcast called Ladies Like Us. When the hosts asked T.I. about how he was talking to his kids about sex education, he had this to say. I'm going to read this to you. This is a direct quote. "Not only have we had the conversation, we have yearly trips to the gynecologist to check her hymen. Yes, I go with her. I will say, as of her 18th birthday, her hymen is still intact." Now, keep in mind, he doubled down on this, and this is a direct quote from T.I. Right after he said that, he said, "So then they come and say, well, I just want you to know that there are other ways besides sex that the hymen can be broken, like bike riding, athletics, horseback riding, and other forms of athletic physical activity." So I say, look, doc, she don't ride no horses, she don't ride no bikes, she don't play no sports. Just check the hymen, please, and give me back my results expeditiously. Obviously, this entire thing was incredibly disturbing, and even though the hosts of the podcast and the people who put that show out edited the comments out, it was already said and people were reporting on what T.I. said. I don't know about you guys, but I think that this is just very, very bizarre and disturbing to say about your own child, especially publicly on a podcast. I mean, I don't know. This is just like, this has always grossed me out. Let me know what you think about these comments in the comment section.
This is the disturbing case of the mistaken identity kidnapping. This case really does take wrong place, wrong time to the next level. On the evening of October the 13th, 2023, 2 brothers and their friend were sat in a car in Miami. The men were Jonathan and Jeffrey Arista and Raymond Gomez. They allegedly grabbed a victim outside of their apartment. One of the trio was dressed as a police officer and even had a gold badge and a police officer's vest. It's reported that they had fake police lights on their car. It's also reported that they forced the victim into the car and then blindfolded him. They then drove him to their Airbnb in Plantation in Miami without realizing that they had the wrong man. Once at the Airbnb, they told the man that he owed them money. Shortly after this, though, they realized they had made the mistake. They had actually intended to kidnap their colleague, but decided to use this man anyway. They allegedly tortured him in the bathroom of the Airbnb before using him to lure in the actual intended target. Thinking fast, the victim actually called police to report a B threat in order to make sure police came quickly. This worked and police sped to the scene at 2 a.m. on the 14th of October. Raymond reportedly tried to flee but ended up crashing his car nearby and hiding in a bush. Police ended up finding him a few hours later. Jonathan was caught by police and Jeffrey was also detained. Raymond admitted to police what they had done and stated that the motive was unpaid debts. The brothers and Raymond now face charges of kidnapping and conspiracy to kidnap. They could all get life in prison.
This man killed his entire family when he was younger, and now he's a college professor. On August 4th, 1967, 15-year-old James Gordon Walcott grabbed a .22 long-barrel rifle and killed his father, mother, and 17-year-old sister in cold blood. When asked what drove him to pull the trigger, Walcott told the investigators that he hated his family. The teenager claimed he was tired of his mother's loud chewing, his sister's bad accent, and his father's disapproval of Walcott's anti-war views. The 15-year-old felt as though his family was conniving against him to drive him out of his mind. At the end of the 6-month trial, the jury acquitted Walcott by reason of insanity, and he was admitted into Rusk State Hospital on February 2nd, 1968, where he spent 6 years. 2 years after his release from the hospital, James Walcott legally changed his name and vanished. Nearly 40 years later, James Walcott resurfaced as an award-winning professor of psychology. In 1976, after changing his name to James St. James, the teenager went on to earn a PhD in psychology and joined the Millikan University in Illinois. Described as an older hippie by his colleagues, St. James has now been teaching at Millikan for over 30 years and won the college's Teaching Excellence and Leadership Award in 1997. Soon after, Dr. St. James was offered the position of chairman at the Department of Behavioral Sciences. After learning about the professor's dark past, the local officials, including the mayor of Decatur, were calling for his removal, but still the university stood by St. James's side and refused to let him go. To this day, Dr. James St. James remains the chair of Millikan's Behavioral Science Department, and his experimental psychology classes continue to receive positive reactions on social media.
I'm a savage! Oh! I'm a savage! Whatever I want, I'm going to get! Whatever I want, I have to get!
According to a recent lawsuit that was filed, P. Diddy might be a pedophile. This new lawsuit alleges that P. Diddy constantly held parties at his house that involved minors, adults who were assaulting these minors, male and female sex workers that were servicing everybody. And this lawsuit even alleges that P. Diddy himself spiked people's drinks at the party to get them looser and convince them to do whatever he wanted them to do. This lawsuit came from one of P. Diddy's former employees, a man nicknamed Little Rod. And this lawsuit is incredibly disturbing and paints a picture of Epstein-level allegations. Allegations that P. Diddy may have been involved in a trafficking ring of sorts. Allegations that P. Diddy forced his employees to go out and procure sex workers for him in his parties. Allegations that P. Diddy violently forced people to do things for him. Allegations that P. Diddy may have murdered people and admitted to it. Amongst many, many other allegations of assault, groping, and yeah, just so many different things. These are some really disturbing allegations, and while they haven't obviously been proven to be true in court yet, the team that actually put these allegations forward claims that they have hundreds of hours of video and audio evidence incriminating P. Diddy and his entire team in this string of illegal acts. I'm sure that this is going to be some really disturbing stuff. I'm going to be sure to cover this story as it unfolds more. And yeah, if this is all true, this is extremely dark and disturbing stuff, and I think that this web is going to spread very far across the music industry.
This is one of the most disgusting and evil cases I've heard of recently. On the 7th of December 2017, teacher Thelma Boinville was desperately trying to make some extra money. She was doing a cleaning job to earn extra money for her family, and the job suited her as her 8-year-old could come along and play while she worked. This was really handy as it meant she didn't have to fork out for childcare. She set out cleaning some holiday homes on the day in question, and her daughter waited in the car. The spot was a lovely scenic place called Kelky Beach. However, instead of walking in on a normal holiday rental to clean, she walked into a nightmare. Stephen Brown and his girlfriend Hayley Dangerand were in the middle of robbing the place. They were scouring through drawers and wardrobes, hunting for valuables to steal. With Thelma walking in, their plan had been foiled. They decided they needed to dispose of their only witness. The evil pair tied up the mother, whose daughter waited unsuspectingly in the car outside. They used a machete, a knife, and a hammer to murder the innocent woman. But the horror was far from over. They exited the holiday home and came across Thelma's young daughter waiting in the car. They callously told the young girl, "We killed your mum," and then bound her up and gagged her. Sickeningly, they then took the 8-year-old into the home where they'd killed her mum and left her there tied up. The 2 Australian tourists who were renting the holiday home then came back and found the crime scene. The 2 killers were tracked down hours later in Thelma's car, which they'd stolen and driven off in. Hayley was actually wearing her victim's earrings at the time. They actually begged for the officers to just shoot them and end their lives, but they wouldn't get away that easily. Thelma's husband Kevin wasn't actually allowed to see his wife's body due to the extent of her injuries. The autopsy revealed that she'd fought for her life, with many defensive wounds indicating a struggle. Since the murder, Stephen and Hayley have both tried to blame each other. Stephen was found guilty of second-degree murder and apparently showed no emotion as the verdict was read out. Hayley is currently awaiting trial.
A Utah couple was just arrested for sexually assaulting their daughter for over a year because they felt it was safer than her having sex with strangers. So last Thursday, police were called to a home in Provo, Utah after a 15-year-old girl was pleading for help. When they arrived, the girl said that her stepdad had been sexually abusing her for over a year, ever since she was 14, and that her mom not only knew, but also participated. The names of the people involved have not been released to protect the victim, but the girl's 38-year-old mom and 34-year-old stepdad were immediately arrested. Upon arrest, they both admitted to repeatedly having sex with their daughter because they felt it was safer for her to experience sexual things with them instead of strangers. According to police reports, the girl's parents reportedly found conversations the girl was having on Snapchat with strangers a year ago, and according to them, they say that she was taking promiscuous photos and planning to meet up with strangers for sexual activities. Both the mom and stepdad then admitted to police to approaching the girl after finding these conversations with the idea of having sexual experiences together in hopes of teaching her about sex. They said they thought that it would help keep her safe. After his arrest, the stepdad admitted to raping the girl just the night before, but that's not all he admitted to. He also admitted to buying the girl sex toys with her mom, where they then showed her how to use the toys on herself and on them. He also admitted to showering with their daughter and engaging in these acts with her mom. According to the affidavit, the mom said that one boundary is that he would never fully have sex with the girl, but that wasn't true because 2 months before they were arrested, she admitted that her daughter came to her scared about a broken condom, so she definitely knew what was going on. Both the mom and stepdad have been arrested for forcible sexual abuse, sodomy, and rape and are currently being held at the Utah County Jail without bail. The couple have 4 other children together, and while the 15-year-old girl is not biologically his, he said he married her mom while she was pregnant and raised her as his own since the day she was born. At this point, since it's still early in the investigation, it's not clear if any of the other children were also abused. This story is absolutely insane, and I can't believe that they would ever think that this was okay.
After police ignored this woman's cries for help about her abusive ex, he killed her. This case will make your blood boil. Nityadavi Ramroop was a 35-year-old mother of 3 from Texas when she was tragically killed last week. She'd been married to Bisham Ramroop for nearly 18 years when they split. During their relationship, he abused his wife. He would threaten her and push her in front of their children. Now, the children were understandably afraid of him. After she was initially really worried to divorce him due to what he could potentially do, she eventually worked up the courage to leave. However, she was right to be afraid. Nityadavi was followed by her ex several times after they broke up. She contacted police numerous times about him stalking and abusing her. Frustratingly, they never filed any charges. He reportedly once followed her to one of her friends' houses and she rang the police, and when the police showed up, they told her they couldn't do anything because no crime had been committed. His behaviour was escalating, and on one occasion he followed her to a bar and dragged her out. One of her friend's husbands had to step in and save her from him. He then went on to vandalize her car, and this was captured on video, and the police did nothing. Shockingly, his family were in on this too. They were contacting her workplace and even showing up and confronting her. The mother of 3 remained focused though. She really wanted to do what was best for her children and make a better life for them all. This would all end in a horrific crime. Just days before their divorce was finalized, on Tuesday last week, he shot her. He had arrived to the house that she'd been trying to keep secret from him. He shot her outside of the property while her sister and children were inside the home. He tried to force his way into the house and confronted her 25-year-old sister and tried to attack her with a piece of glass. He succeeded in stabbing her, and luckily she survived the horrible attack. Beesham was found later deceased from a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
Top 3 scary pictures that will absolutely terrify you. This lady says that she woke up with an upside down cross scratched into her chest, and some people are saying that it's a sign that she might be possessed. Do you think she might actually be possessed? Or is this more than likely just an accident and she scratched herself? This person was exploring the haunted Queen Mary Hotel, which also happens to be an old ship, when they were taking some photos down one of the creepy hallways. Later on, when they were looking at the photos, they noticed this in the background of one of them. So what do you think? Is that really a ghost that they captured on camera? Or maybe just an optical illusion? This photo was taken by a lady. It says she was recording a video for one of her friends in which she was cracking her knuckles because they hate the sound of it. But she said that when she was setting up the video, her friend, who was on the other end of the phone, pointed out a person looking at her from the window behind her. She thought they were playing around until later on she got to see the video, and she saw that it was blinking. She said that she showed her brother the video and he believed her immediately, and that he has even seen that thing before, and that apparently he sees it peeking at him sometimes from the corner of the hall. So what do you think? Could this really be some sort of creature or paranormal entity that was watching her from the window?
Jacqueline Durant, she was a dog sitter. Her face was nearly erased by a dog sitting job gone wrong.
Oh wait, I think I saw this.
A couple of days before, she had visited the dogs. The dogs acted normal, not aggressive. Their names were Lucy, a German Shepherd mix, and Bender, which was a Boxer Pit Bull mix. And they were both rescue dogs. Owners had promised Jacqueline that the dogs would have been caged when she would arrive, so she wouldn't have to worry about them being aggressive. But when the day came, the owners had texted Jacqueline saying that they failed to put them in the cages or whatever. So whenever Jacqueline arrived, as soon as she opened the door, the dogs attacked her. They dragged her into the living room. They tore off her ears, her nose, her lips. They bit her 800 different times all over her body, bro. And there's body cam footage of the cops arriving to the scene. It took them 37 minutes to finally find the opening.
We can't make entry because of the dogs.
Ma'am, can you hear me? Are you the only one inside? Is the big dog right next to you?
So they rushed her to the hospital, lost 30% of her blood, and she was resuscitated multiple times. To make this shit more fucked up was the owners, they had a sign in front of the door that said, "Warning, crazy dogs, do not knock or don't ring the doorbell."
Why would they let her try to dog sit those dogs?
Because apparently he said that we have children in the house. They never showed no signs of being aggressive.
I have 3 kids, one's 3 years old. No history of violence, none.
If they're well behaved, why would they have that?
This father killed the man on live TV who kidnapped and raped his son. In 1984, Gary Plausch, who is pictured right here, tracked down the kidnapper who assaulted and raped his 11-year-old son. He then ended up shooting him in the head on live TV. Gary waited in disguise at the airport and dealt with the kidnapper while cameras were rolling. He was given a 7-year suspended sentence and received no prison time at all. On March 16, 1984, Jeff Doucette, who is pictured here with Gary's son, was flown back to Louisiana to face trial. He arrived at Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport and was led in handcuffs by police officers through the airport at around 9:30 p.m., where Gary was waiting for Jeff. An employee at the local news channel told Jeff that Gary would be arriving at the airport. A news crew was then waiting for Jeff, and they had set up their cameras to record his arrival.
But opposite of the news crew was a bank of payphones, where Gary Plausch was waiting while talking to his best friend on the telephone. He wore a baseball cap and sunglasses so that no one would recognize him. And once Jeff came into view, Gary stepped away from the payphone and hung up the phone, pulled out a gun, and then shot Jeff right in the back of the head, killing him. Cops then quickly restrained Gary on site, and they had him pinned against the bank of telephones asking him, "Gary, why? Why, Gary?" If you want to watch the video, you could easily find it anywhere on the internet. It's honestly not graphic at all, and you don't really see blood at all. So if you easily get traumatized but you want to watch the video for context, you easily could because it's not that bad. But what do you think about this whole case? Was Gary in the right for killing the man who raped his son? Do you think this was justice or just first-degree murder? Also, Gary's wife was also mad about what he did, but not because he killed the guy, but because he didn't tell her and she would have helped him plan it out. All parents say they would do literally anything to protect their kid, and Gary is a prime example of that. As messed up as it is to kill a person, I honestly think Jeff deserved it because he kidnapped and raped Gary's son.
This pedophile and rapist has never been caught. And over the years from 1996 up through 2012, he assaulted over 35 different women. This is the teardrop rapist, and he's an infamous criminal in the Los Angeles area. So there have been a lot of composite sketches made of this guy over the years, and he still has never been caught, even though they have DNA proof. His pattern of crime and his MO is that he usually finds women who are walking alone, he forces them into a secluded area with a knife or a gun, and then he assaults them. Like I said before, the first known attack was in April of 1996, and the latest was in 2012. And while he usually targets adults who aren't minors, in 2011 he targeted a 15-year-old girl. And everybody always reports the same thing. He looks the exact same, he behaves the same way, his voice sounds the same, and he has those 2 teardrop tattoos. So if you're in the Los Angeles area, be sure to look out for a guy who looks like this. This story does have a particularly sad twist though. In 1999, this man, Luis Vargas, was actually sentenced for these crimes. He was sentenced to serve 55 years in prison, and the only evidence that they had was eyewitness testimony. They claimed that they had found the teardrop rapist and that it was him. But in 2015, after he'd been in prison for 16 years, he was exonerated through DNA evidence. Yes, Luis was not the man, and he was wrongfully convicted and held in prison for over a decade, almost 2 decades. And even though that's good news for Luis, that still means that the teardrop rapist is out there somewhere. So keep this in mind, he reportedly weighs about 130 to 170 pounds. He's somewhere from 5'2" to 5'6" inches tall. He's a Hispanic male with brown hair. At around this time in his life, he'd be somewhere from 40 to 55 years old. He preys on women who are on their way to work or school. He strikes between 5 and 8 a.m. in the morning. He always uses some sort of a weapon, and he usually asks his victims for directions before leading them to a secluded area under the threat of hurting them and then assaulting them. So yeah, they'll hopefully get some sort of a break in this case at some point since they have DNA, but I don't know, it's been 20 years since this really started and there's still no real leads.
It's a very viral video, and it's a video of a dirtbag rider who found a missing girl.
I've seen this video.
See her? Sorry?
Yeah.
What the fuck? In the video, he says he thinks he just saw a girl named Carly Gouset. But the only thing was, that wasn't actually Carly Gouset. He basically used that as like clickbait, and it was just misinformation that spread like wildfire. Carly Gouset was actually a 16-year-old girl who went missing back in 2018. She told her family that she was gonna go to a football game at her high school, but in reality, she lied to her parents, and she ended up going to a party with her boyfriend and another friend. During the party, she ends up smoking weed. She starts getting like paranoid to the point where she's starting to get scared of the music, scared of her boyfriend, and she ends up calling her stepmom to come pick her up. Stepmom's name is Melissa, and to pick her up at Highland Park, which wasn't really that far from her house, maybe like 15 minutes away. Melissa goes to pick her up, but when she gets there, she's nowhere to be found. She manages to find her about a mile away from where the party was at. When they get home, it sounds like the weed was laced with another drug. She even records an 8-minute convo of her talking to Carly in the means to teach her a lesson.
You're gonna kill me. Carly, listen to what you just said to me. That you're going to kill me. Don't kill me. Why would I kill you?
She starts saying she wants to go to the hospital, but the parents never take her to the hospital. It gets to a point where Carly ends up going to sleep. Stepmom wakes up for the day. She sees that Carly's phone is on the counter. The door is slightly open, and Carly's missing from her bed. She's gone. This is where like everything doesn't really make any sense because they
This streamer killed his girlfriend while live streaming, and it's one of the most disturbing things ever streamed. Stanislav Reshnikov, who was on the left as a vlogger/streamer, was famously known as Stas Reflay, and he inflicted inhumane physical abuse on his pregnant girlfriend, Valentina Grigorieva, who was on the right when a viewer asked him to do so for merely $1,000 in his YouTube live video. Valentina's beating was followed by Stas stripping her naked and forcefully locking her outside of the house in sub-zero temperatures of December. Valentina kept on knocking on the door, telling him that she was going to die. After 15 minutes, Stas checked on Valentina as she stopped knocking on the door. He then found Valentina's unconscious, not breathing, and pale body. Stas made a failed attempt at resurrecting his girlfriend by giving her CPR. Eventually, he grew very scared of what he had done and called the paramedic team. In the footage, he can be seen carrying her back into his apartment trying to revive her. He is heard saying, "Velia, are you alive? My bunny, what's up with you? Velia, Velia, damn, you look like you are dead. Bunny, come on, tell me something. I'm worrying. Damn, I'm not feeling a heartbeat, guys. No pulse. She's pale. She is not breathing. Wake up, Velia. I love you. Wake up." The paramedic team then arrived and announced Valentina dead upon examination. Initially, she was assumed to die from hypothermia. However, the forensic team revealed that Valentina had died from a head injury inflicted upon her during domestic violence. The police arrested Stas soon after he killed his pregnant girlfriend for money, and he was given a sentence of 6 years by the court in 2021. But what do you think about this? This man literally put his pregnant girlfriend outside in freezing cold temperatures for $1,000 because one of his viewers donated it and told him to. This is absolutely gut-turning, and the live stream, if you ever decide to watch it, is extremely unnerving, especially when her lifeless body gets brought into the live stream. Just hearing him talk to her and knowing that she's dead is extremely unsettling.
This woman murdered her 81-year-old husband by mixing boiling water with 7 pounds of sugar and pouring it over him in bed. Of course, she went to prison, but there's actually a petition calling for her to be released, or to at least have her sentence reduced. And when you hear why, you might actually want to sign it. It was 2020, and Karina Smith was 59 at the time. She had 2 children, a son and a daughter, although her son had committed suicide in 2007. Her son Craig had actually had a short stay in prison after an altercation with another man. He'd actually made a comment to his mum shortly before his death in which he said, "He's a pedo." She thought that he was referring to the man that he had the altercation with, but in actual fact, he was referring to her husband. Karina was married to 81-year-old Michael Baines, and she was also his carer. But in July 2020, her daughter had revealed something shocking and disturbing. Michael had actually sexually abused her and her brother during their childhood for years. Karina was absolutely devastated at this news, and she flew into a rage. She went into the garden and took a bucket. She mixed 7 pounds of sugar and boiling water in that bucket to form a boiling hot syrup. She then went upstairs where Michael was asleep in bed, and she poured it all over his chest and arms. She then ran to a neighbour's house down the street and said to them, "I've hurt him really bad. I think I've killed him." The neighbour called emergency services and Michael was rushed to hospital. He did undergo surgery and multiple skin grafts, but ultimately he died a month later due to his extensive injuries. Karina argued manslaughter due to loss of control, but a jury found her guilty of murder. The prosecution said that Karina's actions were deliberate and considered, and that she intended either to kill Michael or to cause him really serious harm, and so she is guilty of murder. Karina was sentenced to life with a minimum of 12 years, meaning she'll be 71 when she's eligible for parole.
This cartel execution video that I'm about to explain might be the worst one out there. Before I begin, never go searching for this video. The video begins and you see the victim lying on the ground on his back with his hands tied and his shirt pulled over his head. He's surrounded by 3 to 4 cartel members, and one of the cartel members takes out a wooden stick or a plank and begins hitting the victim's feet with it. The video then skips and it shows the aftermath. His feet have been hit so hard by this blunt object that you can see blood leaking through his socks, and all throughout this you hear the victim's muffles of pain. The video then jump cuts again and they take the shirt off the victim's head and stuff his mouth with a gag. And at this point is where it gets truly disturbing. One of the cartel members takes a small knife and starts slicing off the victim's left ear. The sounds at this point are actually horrible. You can hear the victim trying to scream, but because he's gagged, it sounds like he's just snoring. And once the ear has been severed, they place it in his gagged mouth. The camera then pans to the victim's face, and despite the poor quality, you can still see the pain and fear in the victim's face. The video then jump cuts again, and the torture is not over. You see the cartel members hook up a car battery with some jump cables, and they then take the jump cables and electrocute the victim. They start by shocking his chest. You see the sparks flying and you hear the victim letting out grunts of pain. They do this several times and also electrocute his face, which is just awful. The video then jump cuts again and it shows the cartel putting the victim out of his misery. They behead him with a small knife that was used to cut his ear off. The victim is already dead at this point because they show you halfway through the dismemberment process, but it still shows them hacking and slicing away. The video then jump cuts again and it shows that the beheading has been completed, and in the final moments of the video, they take the victim's head and balance it on his chest so that they can capture some photos on their phone. And after this, the video concludes. This video is extremely graphic and I don't recommend you go searching for it. I'm telling you right now, it's just not worth it. This is just another video showing how cruel the world is that we live in, and how evil humans can be to one another.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
You guys remember the case of Riker Webb and how he survived 2 days alone in the woods after going missing? Well, the same thing just happened to this little boy, and it's a crazy story. This is Phoenix Wilkerson. He's a 4-year-old little boy who's autistic and nonverbal, and he disappeared from his family's camper near Sid Bush Road in Clayton, Alabama last Friday. That day, his mom stepped away and went to her mom's home nearby to use the bathroom. And when she returned, little Phoenix was nowhere to be found. At the time, he was barefoot and only wearing a t-shirt and sweats. And with the weather turning cold, his family became extremely worried and began searching for him. But when they still couldn't find him at around 12:30 p.m., they officially reported him missing to the police. It was assumed that Phoenix wandered away from the family camper, so an emergency missing child alert was issued and a massive search began. With the worsening weather conditions, the police almost gave up hope that Phoenix would be found. But nearly 3 days later, a miracle happened. Somehow, after 2 nights of heavy rainfall and freezing temperatures, Phoenix was found alive in the woods, and only a mile away from where he went missing. The volunteer searcher named Mark Heath Williams who found Phoenix said that day he was actually planning on going to church, but his wife kept pushing him to go with her to help search for the missing boy. And when he woke up, he said that Phoenix was heavy on his heart. So the two showed up to the command post and were put into a search group. About 2 miles in, everyone split up and kind of went their separate ways, except for Mark Heath and his group, who decided to search in a different direction than the others. A day after Phoenix went missing, little footprints were reportedly found in a large field, so the group went that direction, and it was there that Mark Heath spotted Phoenix far off in the distance. According to Mark Heath, Phoenix was still wearing the same clothes from the day he went missing, and he was still barefoot. Phoenix reportedly looked really scared until he realized that the group wasn't going to hurt him. This is the odd part though. Despite being found in the woods spending nights in the rain, Mark Heath said that Phoenix didn't appear to be dirty and his feet looked really clean. And according to authorities, Phoenix was calm and in good physical health. He was wrapped in warm blankets and had socks placed on his feet before being taken to the hospital for further evaluation. Mark Heath believes that he was sent by God to save the little boy, and thankfully he was found, although the investigation into his disappearance remains ongoing. It's not often that stories like this have a good outcome, so I'm thankful that Phoenix is now safe and sound.
Serial killer Robert Pickton may be one of the most disturbing cases in human history. As a young boy, Robert grew up on a pig farm, and so he was surrounded by the sound, smell, and sight of death on a daily basis. His father was very disengaged, very uninvolved in Robert's life, but Robert's mother, however, was a strong force in his life. Robert's mother worked him and his brother David ruthlessly on the farm. They didn't have much of a childhood, and when they did go to school, they were bullied because they smelled of pig shit and death, and they were often covered in feces and sometimes even blood from the farm. And so naturally, Robert had trouble making friends and getting connected with people because he was the stinky, smelly kid that nobody wanted to be around. Now, this lack of social development, on top of a lack of human connection on any significant level, plus being heavily desensitized to death, this was a recipe for disaster. Robert grew from a disturbed young child to a very socially awkward, withdrawn, and quiet adult. And after his parents passed away, he and his brother David inherited the pig farm that they had worked on as children, and they let it get really run down, and that farm became a place of horrors that still haunts Vancouver, Canada to this day. Robert, in adulthood, continued to have extremely poor hygiene. He was stubbly, he was smelly, so he was not the kind of guy that was going to be able to pick up women naturally or to develop any kind of significant healthy relationships. And so the way that Robert would get his sexual needs met would be through hookers on the Lower East Side of Vancouver known as Low Track. However, Robert was not only getting a physical need met by these women of the night, he was coercing them into his truck, onto his farm, where he would brutally murder them and dismember them. After 14 years of women disappearing off the streets of Vancouver, finally, Robert's farm was raided and the human remains of over 50 people were found. The most disturbing facts of all were that he was disposing of the bodies of the women he was killing by feeding them to the pigs and also by filtering the body parts through the pig processing and was selling that to consumers. It is very, very likely that the people of Vancouver had consumed some of Robert's victims. It's even said by some psychologists that Robert took delight in this because it was a quiet way of bragging to people and showing off his work. In this week's episode of my podcast, Jordan Talks a Lot, I'm going to be taking a deep dive into the Robert Pickton case, and you don't want to miss it. Go to the link in my bio, click podcast, and see me there.
You'll never guess what unlikely job this man got after his wife cut off his private parts. John Bobbitt from New York was taken off his mum at an early age. She'd struggled with mental health issues, so he was placed in the care of his aunt and uncle. He met Loretta Gallo in 1988, and the pair had a whirlwind romance. Despite the fact that she could barely speak the same language as John, they married in 1989, aged just 20 and 22. He later stated that he felt pressured to marry her as her visa was about to expire. In 91, the pair were having money issues. John was discharged from the Marines and was struggling to get work. Lorena was earning the majority of the household income, and there were reports that John couldn't handle this. He allegedly started abusing her and R-ing her. When she became pregnant, he allegedly made her get rid of the pregnancy. Now, John denies these claims and he states that Lorena was the abuser. He claims that she could be controlling and aggressive. 4 years after they had got married, John asked for a divorce and Lorena was really against this. It was the evening of the 22nd of June 1993 and John had gone out drinking with friends. When he returns, Lorena claims that he R-ed her. It was now the early hours of the morning and Lorena went to the kitchen after the attack to get some water. It was then that she saw a knife, grabbed it and used it to amputate John's private parts. Obviously, John had to be rushed into hospital, and while a friend took him, Lorena fled with his pee in her hand. She ended up throwing it into a field and turning up at her manager's house. She confessed to her what had happened and the manager called the police. Now, after being grilled by authorities, Lorena told police where they could find John's severed body part. They actually were able to find it in time and put it in ice. Miraculously, surgeons were able to stitch it back onto John after a 9.5-hour operation. John and Lorena were both arrested for their apparent crimes. Now, the incident was huge and many big TV shows covered it. In court, John was acquitted of the SA in 93. Lorena was found not guilty of malicious wounding due to temporary insanity. She was held in a mental health facility for 45 days. The couple's divorce was finalised and John ended up with a rather unlikely career in adult entertainment. John also then ended up being accused and found guilty of a number of violent crimes against women. He spent time in jail for the domestic battery of his then fiancée Christina and later had a second domestic battery charge. He was later convicted of harassing an ex-girlfriend. Then, in the early 2000s, he faced charges of assaulting his then wife, Joanna. Bizarrely, in 2009, John actually admitted to still having feelings for Lorena, and as recently as 2019, he was writing her love letters.
This man bought rope, tied a noose, drove his friend out to the woods, and encouraged her to take her own life. This man's name is Tyrell, and this story is incredibly disturbing. So the 16-year-old girl who unfortunately took her own life was Chandra Brown. Chandra was a 16-year-old girl living in Utah who her whole family called Jelly because she loved Jelly Belly jelly beans. But on May 16,